Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Megan and Todd Talk D&D. And today we will be discussing further how to make a monster into a playable character. Today we will be discussing Bagman.
Yeah, so there's this, it's kind of fun. In Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, they give examples of like describing monsters and kind of even urban legend-like monsters. And they give you an example of an idea of a character that's called the Bagman. This creature is, as they describe it, maybe was a person who abandoned his party and decided to stuff himself into a bag of holding to avoid danger, possibly in a very Ravenloft flavor, as his party was killed, and then became lost in the interdimensional, matrix of all the bags of holding. And they kind of describe it as this, if you whisper a certain thing with your bag of holding open, the Bagman may crawl out. And it's a very creepy idea.
So he's like the Beetlejuice of bags.
I would say more Bloody Mary.
Okay.
But so it's a very kind of, creepy myth, and it makes bags of holding a little creepier. What's funny is for the last 3 years, I love using bags of holding. I use them as portals to other dimensions. I've had entire worlds and universes being inside of a bag of holding or a bag of devouring. I had episodes where a bag of devouring ate the party, and they ended up in first edition D&D, and then time moved differently there. So every hour inside of this bag of devouring, 7 years might go by in the real world. And so the very kind of upsetting, kind of creepy stuff.
Yep.
But what's funny about the Bagman, as described, is there's only a finite amount of air in a bag of holding. Van Richten's Guide, which mentions this Bagman, has the reborn as a lineage. Do not need food. They do not need water. They do not need air. And since none of those things are in a bag of holding, oh boy, is this convenient. So if you have a bag of holding, or you're an artificer who can make their own bag of holding, you, as a reborn, can just crawl into your own bag of holding and hang out. Sit in a chair, drink some wine, relax in your little tiny interdimensional portal, or bubble, and you're totally okay. And you are functionally the Bagman. Like, you can make it so, what kind of person, what happens to you as time goes by? Not only are you a reborn, but you also live in a bag of holding. You are like a weird, creepy construct hermit crab, right? You can really kind of think about what happens to you psychologically if you live in a bag of holding, and you can play it very easily in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Weirdly enough, you can be the Bagman. Now, I wouldn't go full monster necessarily, but yeah, maybe you got elongated claws over time and you're very disheveled because you're just not, you're existing, maybe you're choosing to exist or rest for 4 hours in a place without gravity, where the laws of physics don't really matter. It's kind of interesting, and it's very, very weird. And I can imagine a lot of other things happening from there. It's just kind of a fun character concept, I think, that is completely playable. So I would imagine an artificer would be perfect for this.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Yeah. If an artificer can make their own bag of holding, and you also have your homunculus at level 7, maybe your homunculus might be able to carry the bag of holding around and infiltrate towns.
Yeah.
And no one would know anything about it.
You could have your homunculus fly around with you in a bag of holding. And this is important too, because the rules aren't quite defined. What happens if you get shoved into a bag of holding, if you yourself can just easily escape? You don't want to necessarily puncture your bag of holding to do so. But it does become very funny if you are like, well, we need to infiltrate this tower or this castle, and you as a reborn who doesn't need to breathe just pops into the bag of holding, your homunculus grabs it and drops you across enemy lines. You become this very adept ninja. So you can get up to a lot of comedic things or some really, really creepy things. It depends on what you want to do here, but I like the Bagman. I love the flavor of it. I'm weirdly bag obsessed in D&D, and I found it funny that you can easily play this character in Ravenloft almost like right away.
Yeah, it was almost one of your bag victims in one of the episodes of Heroes of the Plains recently. I think it was just 2 episodes ago.
Yeah, I did make, because Averin, my character, had such a connection with bags of devouring, I thought it'd be interesting to introduce these little bags of devouring that chomp over your neck, like eat your head. Their teeth sink into your neck.
I had one completely over my head.
Yeah, and then suddenly it controls your body. And it kind of reminded me of Silent Hill, those nurses that have the bandages around their faces, that creepy scene. And so the idea that all these people had been taken over by these bags, it's also very, like Half-Life or Alien with the alien, creatures, facehugger on your face. So it has that flavor. But it shows you, again, how you can use some of these latest lineages and these races to kind of do whatever you want as a player. And obviously you want buy-in from the rest of the group to a degree.
Sure.
And obviously your DM's approval. But it is weirdly easy how much you can make, say, kind of like a gnome squidling, or the Bagman, or you can make Venom come to life in D&D now. Because Van Richten's guide gives you so many really fun options. Now, Ravenloft obviously has a much darker flavor, and you being the ultimate monster is not really in the cards in Ravenloft necessarily until the end game, right? But I can see a lot of creepy things happening. Like, again, if you spend all your time in another dimensional portal, a bubble, like a bag of holding, that's got to alter you. And what if something else is in the bag with you? What if something starts communicating you in the shadows? That can become very fun as well.
So, as a Bagman in a bag of holding, do you have any kind of advantages with the options that you chose, like lineages, subclasses? Because if you're always in a bag of holding, I would assume that you have an advantage on stealth checks, or if anything that's great at perceiving, like maybe they'll see maybe some bumps and lumps in the bag.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, I could see you flavoring other items and infusions you have as an artificer to kind of supplement that idea that you have existed in this so much. Now, the weirdest thing that I would do, that I would posit to my DM, secretly, is that perhaps the bag is sentient, and I am the bag. So then, what if we reverse the dark gift from Van Richten's guide to Ravenloft? We have symbiotic entity, but the symbiotic entity is the humanoid character you're playing. The bag is your consciousness, and you are spitting yourself out into the world to interact as a human or an elf or whatever. But in a way, this physical humanoid is the bag's infusion, not the other way around. So maybe you could work out with your dungeon master that the core of who you are, that your symbiote is this bag of holding also. It is another fun and wacky and totally weird and alien thing to do. And I know these are all off-the-wall ideas, but I love thinking about this stuff.
I could kind of see a Starspawn emissary mimicking a bag of holding, too.
I'm
not really sure what kind of lineage you'd have to choose for that.
I'd probably pop one into a bag of holding and be like, surprise! But they're already such a surprise. But there's some real chicanery.
Yeah, as if you had to make them more terrifying.
I don't think you need to add to the Starspawn emissary, but like that is even more upsetting, for sure.
It might kind of feel like splitting the party a bit at times, because if you're always in your bag and people are having a conversation, then you would assume that you can't actually hear what they're saying.
Yeah, you do have to talk about that stuff, and then you very much kind of enter into rogue territory. If your homunculus is grabbing you and sending you over like a wall and stuff like that. I wouldn't do it all the time, but I think it's kind of eccentric and weird, and it's more of a role-playing flavor than anything, and certainly it's going to get you out of some situations.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Magical items are very, very nearly impossible to destroy under a lot of circumstances. You can destroy a bag of holding from the inside, absolutely, but that again, the idea that you're inside of a bag of holding when you're having your 4 hours of rest, reborn as lineage don't really need to sleep, but it does become kind of interesting. Like it's your tiny itty bitty sleeping bag, and that's gotta kind of creep out the rest of the party on some level.
Yeah. I would think so. Yeah, maybe it would be good for like a one shot or something.
Well, but now that I say that, there's a genie flavored warlock in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that very much has an ability where you go into this kind of like small tiny dimension. That's part of that subclass, and that connects. So it's not that absurd to think of a character that can potentially go inside this bag of holding.
Okay.
And rules is written, you can absolutely do it. Of course, you don't know what's, like you said, you don't know what's going on the outside. What if someone kills your homunculus and no one lets you out? There's a lot of what if someone throws a portable hole in there and then lets a dimension within a dimension and everything explodes?
It can go wrong really quickly.
You're not really getting that many advantages. It's just kind of funny and absurd.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's the whole point, right? Like,
just to have fun.
It's just thinking outside the box, making monsters or creatures playable, and I think that just makes it really interesting.
This is the stuff that Megan and I just talk about, and it's absurd. And, if we get to play it, then great. So.
I also think it would be kind of funny if Bagman was actually stitched together with pieces of a bag of holding, and he himself was a bag of holding.
That is actually great because that is technically possible, right? Like you are kind of you're not actually a construct anymore as a reborn, but you are like the idea that you are stitched together magical items still works. Or what if the bag of holding is made out of skin or leather? There's like there's a lot going on there that you can work with.
Yeah.
To make it even more creepy, but the fact that you are a stitched together bag of holding could be very upsetting as well.
You enter a town and all the townsfolk just see a group, and then this one human-shaped canvas bag pass by.
Right. You're looking very much like a scarecrow.
Yeah.
In some terrible way. Yeah, I would not mess with that.
No.
That person.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. This was another really creepy conversation about what happens inside of our brains when we're not on camera. We'll see you next time.